Morning, everybody. We would like just to take this time to give you an insight into the utilisation of chitin as a PCN biocontrol agent as part of our RISS group. So I'd like to be able to welcome to Mark Clark from Grampian Growers, who was one of the potato and bulb growers in the RISS group. And we will take you through some questions, which hopefully gives you an idea of what the group actually tackled and what it achieved. So my name is Helen and I'm the SAOS Facilitator for the RISS group. And during this spotlight session, Mark and I hope that we can illustrate how the bottom-up approach of RISS was the fundamental reason for the group's success. So hopefully, Mark, you can hear me. So the first question is, tell us, Mark, why controlling PCN in potato and bulb growing is important to these sectors.
Thanks, Helen. Morning, everyone. I think a lot of folk would know in terms of, over many decades that Scotland has been known as a sort of high health area for growing both seed potatoes and daffodil bulbs. In the case of both crops, they both require PCN-free land in order to be primarily exported, be it North Africa, Middle East, Far East, Europe or USA. The statistics show, and these were brought to us during the RISS group by SASA, that as an industry, if we don't do anything in the next 25 to 30 years, Perthshire, Fife and Angus will have no PCN-free land available to grow seed potatoes and bulbs. So in terms of Grampian growers, that means in effect we have no business. Quite brutal.
Thanks, Mark. So why was the biocontrol approach using chitin favoured by the growers in the group rather than relying on chemical approaches?
When we sort of started up the group and we had a sort of collection of individuals, the sort of chitin was identified as one of the first avenues. We often use the analogy of wheels and spokes, and the chitin and the chitin compost was one of these spokes. And in particular, where we were coming from was the aspect of timeliness. At Grampian, we're heavily involved in potato breeding, which can be sort of 8 to 10 years before any particular variety may or may not come out of that breeding program. So the chitinous compost was, it had been identified back in 2012. There was an element of work carried out in field scale trials with SRUC and with some really positive results. And for whatever reason, it wasn't really sort of continued and identified as being one of the sort of key options. So the RISS group, primarily identified that as one aspect of many aspects that we believe is, could be really important for the control of PCN.
Thanks, Mark. So how important was it to have the whole value chain represented in your group?
As being MD at Grampian, we sort of live and breathe sort of cooperation and collaboration. So we identified really quickly, right from that sort of very first meeting, there was a sort of huge amount of enthusiasm in the group. There was a huge amount of specialism in the group. And what we identified was to try and get everyone that had a sort of key input into the sort of project of PCN control. So we had, for example, we had agronomy companies, we had soil science companies, we had nematology, we had ag chem, farmers, bulb growers and potato growers, sort of horticultural industry, research and education. So we probably within the first 2 meetings, we sort of identified who we needed to sit round that table with the expertise and how would we go about, sort of pulling all these individuals together, which in effect, everyone on the call today, we've all got day jobs, and in particular people giving up their time because of the sort of severity of what we recognise is coming down the train tracks.
So that's great. So as you've just illustrated there were many people around the table, and this RISS group started off with face-to-face meetings, and we transitioned very well to the online Zoom meetings, where I was able to use the mute control sometimes. But would you like just to tell us, Mark, what were, in your opinion, the successes and the legacy of this group?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say there was many successes, but there still is many successes. You know, if I go through sort of some of the sort of highlights of the sort of 5-6 month period where we met, you know, on a very regular basis, the sort of research and development applications, you know, came out with some really, really sort of positive outcomes, both from a sort of financial perspective and an information and sort of data perspective. We then went on to create an industry-wide working group under the sort of guidance of Mr. McPherson, the Minister for Rural and Natural Environment, and prior to that, Marie Goujon, who was also involved in it. So that industry working group was really key to create a fairly sizable document that we're now currently working on, looking at JHI Plant Health Centre, for example, hopefully attracting some sizable funding. Joint industry funding, we've been in the last 10 days very successful. Scottish Agronomy, Harper Adams, JHI, HDB and Grampian Growers have attracted a £75,000 postgraduate fellowship student looking at both nematodes for bulbs, stem and bulb eelworm and PCN, so really excited about that. One of our partners, Angus Horticulture, working with JHI, Plant Health Centre, SASA, SEPA, accreditation bodies, looking at composting on a large field scale. Again, that's exciting. And the group has continued pretty much from day one up until now, focused on that sort of collective, collaborative and cooperative sort of view as to how we address that. And certainly last but not least, I think the previous speaker mentioned about the importance of the facilitator, and I'm probably going to embarrass you, Helen, here, because without that level of facilitation and that commitment to certainly our group taking detailed minutes, getting the minutes out quickly, looking at action points, who's doing what, when that needs to be done. I think without that level of facilitation, the group certainly wouldn't have been as successful as it has been. So I think so. To sort of summarise, a very positive working group with you know, real positive outcomes that have come out of it.
That's good. Thanks very much, Mark. And we're going to be very happy to answer any questions. Back to you, Megan.